I think I do. Fantastic. Okay, so here we are, 7th of October. I'm delighted to be joined by the legend that is Andy Bounds. So thank you to all our participants and attendees who are currently still logging on as we speak. So I'm happy to take any questions from anyone as we go along. So if you do want something particularly answered by Andy, do please chuck in the chat box. I'll be keeping an eye on that as we go along. I've got some questions, as I was just saying to Andy, that I've prepared to get the conversation going, and I've had a few come in from other people who got some specifics. So I'll start by introducing you, Andy, and then you can, mine will be very short, and then you can add to it if you want to. So Andy's been described as a communications genius. He's won Britain's Sales Trainer of the Year. He's the author of 3 books, which I'm embarrassed to say, Andy, I've seen you speak 3 times, and I didn't actually clock that you'd written any books. So it's either kudos to you because you don't try and sell them when you speak in, or I was so engaged, because usually when someone speaks, I go and have a quick Google of them. I was so engaged in you that I just didn't look. But they are now winging their way to me, Amazon Prime. They should be with me tomorrow.
Cool.
So I would suggest that you help improve businesses, help improve communications, help improve leaders, help improve performance, and many other things. But maybe you can just start off, Andy, but if you don't mind sharing with people how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Really happy to do that, Craig. So like many people, my first career wasn't maybe my my soulmate career, if you like. I quite enjoyed it. I was an accountant to start with, loved that, but it wasn't what I was put on the earth to do, I didn't think. And I found that when I was there, I used to be the one who was always explaining stuff to clients. And I quickly realized I was more interested in the explaining than I was in the accountancy. And then I started working for a company that trains people how to pass their accountancy exams, you know, the professional ones, the chartered ones, and so on. And I really got into a nerd level about understanding how people's brains receive information. So I studied adult learning, accelerated learning. We had a look at different ways that the brain can receive information and all that sort of stuff. And as I was there for about 6-7 years, I found I was getting better because my pass rates went up. So at the time I was there, national average pass rates were like 55-60%. By the time I finished, I was getting 95%. And I thought, well, I think I might know something here that other people don't. Yeah. I didn't really think anything of it. And then I went to a presentation by a bank, which was just rubbish. I was there, it was so boring. I can't even tell you, like, wordy slides. They didn't engage the audience. They just droned on. And I thought, why were they so boring? You know, they paid to hire that room. They paid to give us all food. It was dreadful. And then a week later, I went to another presentation by another bank, and it was worse. And then it suddenly dawned on me, I think most presentations aren't very good. I don't think I've been unlucky here. And I casted my mind back, and I realized that most people didn't know necessarily how to engage. And because I'd done all this research, I should have said, you know, my childhood, my mum's blind. So I've always been interested in communication, because how can I explain things so she gets it? She's very clever. She just can't see. So this combination of having a blind mum and then studying the way people's brains work and doing presentations to accountants for years, that led me to think I might have something that other people don't have. Started my own business, and here we are. So it's gone okay.
So that was interesting then about, you said, you know, the presentations were poor and people not using this. So do you think maybe that's confidence? Do you think that's poor preparation? Or I mean, what has your experience told you?
Well, it could be various things, but often it's like, you know, there are certain things that if you go on a conference call, it's probably boring. You know, if you go to an update meeting with your team, there'll be someone who thinks, here we go again. There are just certain things with communication that often just aren't very good. And we've all sat through presentations with wordy slides in them. We've all been on the receiving end of a sales pitch, and we've looked at the salesperson and thought, I hate you. Like, shut up. You know, we've all been to places and we've thought, like, why have you sent me that email, which is this long? You know, so communication, we all know what we hate when we're on the receiving end of it. But what we do is we are all creatures of habit. So we communicate the way we did last week. And because we're creatures of habit, we begin to replicate what we see everybody else do. So if you like, what we hate, we do. So we might be on the receiving end of a presentation with very word-filled slides, and we hate it. But when we do the presentation, we begin to think, well, that's what presentations are like. And then we have very word-filled slides to give speaker prompts for us, you know? And so it just becomes a force of habit, I find. So yes, it's confidence. Yes, it's skills. But more importantly than anything, Craig, it's just the habits people get in. And they just, I bet, for example, I imagine your emails look quite similar to your emails last week. I know mine look quite similar to mine last week. And that's okay as long as they were brilliant last week, but they might not have been. So it's habits are the thing that have the biggest impact.
Okay. Maybe before we get into that a little bit more, let's maybe learn a bit more about you for those who maybe haven't heard of you before. So if you were, who are your heroes then, Andy, when growing up, and now who are your heroes?
Oh, wow. Loads really. I remember when I was a child, like I was just weird, I think. So for example, one of my heroes when I was a child was Walt Disney. So I mean, most kids like Walt Disney because they like the films and going to Disneyland and stuff. But I just thought Disney sounded quite a pioneering chap, you know? So I think the modern equivalent is like Steve Jobs, who pioneered, and everyone's read his book and everyone like thinks he came up with lots of new things. Well, when I was young, I used to think Walt Disney. And so I read about how, so when my mates wanted to go to Disneyland, I wanted to read about how Walt Disney came up with the idea of Disneyland. So as I say, proper nerd. But now when I look around, there's lots of really good speakers around, people who have wonderful integrity. So I love watching the likes of people like Paul McGee, the sumo guy. He's brilliant. Chris Hughes is brilliant. Steve Head. Over in America, Alan Weiss. You know, the normal list, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, all these people are really, really good. And I love listening to them.
What advice would you give now to your 19-year-old self?
Well, that's a good question. I guess cheesy one, follow your passion a bit. I mean, when I was 19, I mean, I said before about mum being blind. I'm blind in the left eye. I've got very poor eyesight, so I can't see far enough to drive. So I remember when I was 19, thinking all my mates are driving. Maybe I'm not very cool. I wasn't particularly good at sport. I was quite clever. So that wasn't a cool thing when I was at school. And so I think I just felt, like many 19-year-olds do, that life's quite hard. But I did have this real passion for explaining things. You know, I used to nerdily sort of get off when I was looking at people explain things. So I thought, if you just had said this better. So that was always my passion. And I guess if I'd realized that I could have made a career out of it when I was 19, that would have been cool. It took me till I was 31, really. But that's it. So follow your passion. So anyone who is doing something which they hate, it might just be worth thinking, what is it that I love? And can I incorporate some of that in my day job?
So I'm interested, Andy, when you decided all that time ago to set up your own business and teach people how to communicate better, what was the starting, what was it in your brain that made you think, right, well, I'm going to deliver this, or I'm going to teach people to do this bit? Where was the starting point for it?
Well, I mean, the starting point was firstly realizing there was a need with those two banking presentations. And then I thought, yeah, but how do I package this up, and will people pay for it? Because, you know, I've got some nice little ideas in my head. You've got some nice ideas in your head. Everyone's got nice ideas in their head. But actually saying to someone, I've got ideas in my head and I'm not going to tell you any of them until you give me some money, which is actually what you do if you sell your brain, is quite a weird thing. So what I spent a long time doing was thinking, how can I make this something people will find acceptable to have a conversation with? And in effect, because you've got to make sales in my job, give me money for what's in my head. So once I realized there was a market need, that was quite obvious, Craig, but then I had to think about how I could turn it into something which I felt comfortable talking about and people felt comfortable giving money for. And that took a bit of a while. But once I felt comfortable with it, I was in a good place then.
So what was the first thing you did? Taught people how to communicate better on an individual level or in groups, or was it presentations and they took stuff away, or?
Yeah, a bit of all of them, but generally the thing I did most of all was group training, just because when I've been teaching the accountants, I used to have 25 or 30 of them. So I was used to talking to lots of people. And I mean, accountants, I think, are wonderful things. I've been one. My wife is one. And they're very clever. And the people I was talking were in their were in their early 20s. So therefore, they were very clever and had all the energy and the certainty that you can have when you're at that age. And you've really got to be on your toes. So I was used to talking to that sort of size group of clever people. So I'd sometimes do what you said, then I'd sometimes do one-to-one, and I'd sometimes do the, like, let me help you with your presentation. But it was more going into a group of people to help with their communication. And then I had an epiphany moment where I got called to help a group of salespeople. And I'd never thought of myself as a salesperson. I thought of myself, you know, first and foremost as a trainer, really. And I suddenly realized that my way of deconstructing communication, which is so important for your regular update meetings at work, it's really important with salespeople, because if they can deconstruct it and make it persuasive and sexy, then there's immense value to salespeople in that. So I always see myself as a communication enabling thing, but actually there's become an enormous subset, which is my ability to help people sell more. So it started first off communication training, quickly went into sales training, and now I guess it's more consultancy, but that's been the journey.
So what do you, if someone comes to you and they've got 10 years of habits, are you trying to open their mind to new stuff? Are you trying to get rid of the old habits? What's the process you're trying to take people on?
Yeah, so a couple of things really. Firstly, it's helping them discover for themselves their habits aren't very good. And because if they're currently on path A and they've been on path A for 10 years, some random bald scouser saying, you need to go on path B, but it just doesn't work. And even if they get the logic, there's no emotional drive to go. So I have to help them discover that what they're doing isn't optimal. So let's use an example of a sales team, though this could work with any type of person, really. Let's say they've recently done a sales presentation. What I'll often do with the team is I'll say, right, tell me a company that's recently seen this presentation. And they will say, I don't know, Apple or something. So, right, okay, I'd like you please to pretend you are an executive in Apple. So can you all think of one? Right, okay, so all think of one. So you're all pretending to be that person. I am now going to deliver your presentation to you. So we're changing roles. So I pretend I work for you even though you don't. And you pretend you don't work for you, you now work for Apple. So pretend to be the customer. And I'll just deliver it for 5 minutes. And then afterwards, I'll say, so did you like it? And almost always sales teams go, no. I'll say, why not? They go, it's boring. Why was it boring? I said, what did you think was missing? What did you think of the visuals? Oh, God, they were rubbish. What did you think of my interaction? Oh, God, there wasn't any. And so, if you like, they suddenly think, I did that last week and I thought it was good. But now I've seen it presented to me in a different way. There's a real emotional thing there, Craig, because they think, I need to change because I hated it. And once they realize they need to change, it then becomes much easier to say, okay, well, let me show you how to get across to path B. Let me show you the building blocks to move across. So the first step is to help people discover for themselves they need to change. That's better than me saying you need to change, because they'll just go, no, I don't.
That must be hard though. Because I mean, if they haven't got, I'm thinking if they haven't got creative, because I always feel like I've got something new to say, but the creative bit, the way of articulating it different is always the challenge. How do you take them on that journey?
Well, I mean, there's different ways you can do it, but the key thing always is to find where they are now. So I've seen plenty of people who do my job who I mean this nicely, but they sort of have a script. And it's like they'll go into a room and say, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, here comes my script. And I don't like that. I want to find out where they are in the world, and then I can adapt my script to them. And so very often what you find is you have core messages that everybody wants to hear, but you've got to get your start right. And the start comes from like finding things out. So for example, I was talking at a lovely virtual conference recently, and I spoke to a couple of the people who were going to be in my audience. And I said, what do you find some of the biggest challenges at the minute? And they said, all these Zoom doom calls, they do my head in. I hate looking at my diary every morning and seeing back-to-back Zooms. And so that's where they are at the minute. So if I go and say, let me tell you the 3 cutting-edge best practices with communication, no one's listening because they're starting over there. Yeah. So my opening sentence was, I want to start with a very personal question. Have any of you woke up any time in the last week and looked at your diary and seen back-to-back Zooms and thought, I'm not looking forward to today? And obviously, Craig, all the room go, ha, yes. And so in one sentence, they go, yeah. And then, of course, I can say, and am I right, this doesn't just apply to your Zooms. Sometimes you get emails that aren't too good. Sometimes you get this. Sometimes you get this. And they go, yes, that's right. So now we've bonded because I've now focused on something they're interested in. Then I can say, well, I've got some good news for you. The thing that fixes all those, there's only 3 techniques you need. So give me 10 minutes. I'll show you what those 3 are. So that's how you do it. So you understand. So you find out what's important to them, start there, and then you segue into the thing you want to talk about anyway.
Well, okay. So that brings us to our first external question that I had in advance. So as a communication expert, what tips can you give to help those who are now trying to communicate their message via Zoom and other tools?
Okay, it's an absolutely brilliant question. there are certain things that you should have done when you were face to face, but you probably didn't do, but you could probably get away with, because face to face, you can cover things up, because you get this intimate interaction going. That goes when you're doing this sort of stuff. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that the stuff you should have been doing anyway, you really have to do it now. And there are 2 or 3 things that will really help. The most important one is to prepare questions. Now, what I mean by this is when you go and have a meeting with someone in Starbucks, like you'll probably just end up chatting because that's what happens. But when you're doing this, if you're not careful, you might just talk for 20 minutes and nobody interrupts you because it's harder to interrupt.
Yeah.
So what I always advise is when you're talking to someone using Zoom or whatever the medium is, don't just prepare your talk track. Also spend equal effort preparing questions you'll ask. Because if I prepare great talk track, I'm interesting, but that's it. If I prepare great questions that get you talking, you become interesting. And if I can somehow do a bit of prep for me and a bit of prep for you with good questions, we are bound to have a really good, interesting conversation. For example, I was talking to someone last week. They were doing a Zoom thing with some slides, and one of their slides said the 4 main benefits of working with us. So they had this slide with like 4 colored boxes and benefits in each one. They were really proud of it. All the boxes were in different colors and everything, Craig. They were so chuffed. And I said, okay, that's good. What questions are you going to ask when this slide comes up? And they just looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, well, you're going to put this thing up. That is crying out for interactivity. But unless you ask questions, they might not interact. And you need interactivity there. So what I did is I coached them through some questions they could ask. So just as they prepared the slide and the talk track, they now had questions. So on the day, they put this slide up and said, so that's what we think are the 4 main benefits. Question. How do they look to you? What do you think? Do you think we've got the main ones in there, or have we missed any? All right. And so which of these 4 that I've got on that one you said, those 5, which do you think is the most important one? Oh, really? Why is that? So what impact do you think that's going to have on your business then? So ideally, how quickly would you like that to happen? And can you hear, Craig, as I'm going through these questions, you can hear how that will be a really brilliant 2-way interaction. But if we hadn't prepared any questions, they would have banged the slide there. The audience would have gone, yeah, got it. And everyone just would have moved on. So if you prepare questions, you guarantee it's going to be 2-way. That's the easiest way to do it.
Any other top tips on this Zoom phenomenon?
Yes. Oh, yeah, millions. Right, here's another one. Make sure your first sentence is good. So most people's first sentence, we said before about creatures of habit, people often start today's Zoom like they did yesterday's Zoom. And often, if you're a bit scared of the person you're speaking to, that might be, thank you for sparing the time. It's good of you to give me a bit of time today, and so on. But if you do that, what you're doing is you're putting them on a pedestal. So the first thing is, thank you for sparing the time. I mean, they didn't thank you. So that's not a best way to start. Another way to start might be something like, I've been really looking forward to our call today. In fact, I found out a couple of things I wasn't expecting when I was preparing for it. Now, can you hear from that sentence? If you're receiving that, you haven't heard anyone else say they've been looking forward to a meeting. You haven't heard anyone else say all day they've done some research. And I've just told you I found out 2 things I wasn't expecting. So now you're quite intrigued.
I was leaning forward. I could feel myself leaning
Yeah,
forward.
that's right. And I'm making it up. So what happens is I always say to people, if you think of your opening sentence is like a serve in tennis. If you serve well, you probably win the point. And if you serve badly, you'll probably lose the point. So if you say, thank you for sparing the time, that's not very good. But if you say what I've just said, you probably will win. And the other thing about a serve in tennis is the tennis is the only, if you think of a rally in tennis, every single shot, you always are running to where your opponents hit it, apart from the serve, because the serve, they haven't hit it yet. So 2 things about your opening serve. It dictates probably how the point will go, and you aren't responding to them yet. And I think that is a great analogy for your opening sentence in a Zoom meeting. So the first words out of your mouth are going to dictate how successful that point is. And if you do a bad opening, with respect, that's your fault because they haven't said anything yet. Yep. So prepare your opening, get your serve brilliant, prepare some really good questions to get them talking. And the final thing I strongly suggest you do is always finish early. And the way you make sure you finish early, sorry, I've got a phone ringing here. Let me just turn that off. So the way you make sure you finish early is you have a little note. So you always got your clock on your computer. And what I suggest you do with about 10 minutes to go, 5 at the outside, I try for 10. I always say, I'm conscious of time. That's my closing bridging sentence. So if you're on a Zoom and you say, I'm conscious of time, I can guarantee they'll look at their watch. And then they look at you. And in that nanosecond, they see there's 10 minutes to go, but also they stop speaking. So in that nanosecond, you've gone from chat into we're now in the close. So if you say I'm conscious of time with 10 minutes to go, they look at you and say, so should we quickly agree our actions before we wrap this up? They say yes. And that way you finish on time and with actions. So there you go. They're the 3 things. Number 1, prepare questions. Number 2, prepare your opening. Make sure your serve's good. Number 3, say I'm conscious of time with 10 minutes to go, and you'll always end on time with actions.
I remember at the start of this whole Zoom phenomenon, finding myself at the end of these calls actually waving to people, and I can't remember whether I instigated it or the other person instigated it. So what's a good way to end?
Well, that's fine. I mean, as long as you've got actions, you're all right. I mean, so at the end of this one, we might go, see ya, that's okay. I was doing a webinar the other day to a few people, and I don't know what, I think it was just one of my kids had walked in. I could just see them in my peripheral vision. And at the end of the webinar, I said, right, see ya, love you, like this. And afterwards I thought, that's probably not that corporate. But you know what? I checked in with the organizer afterwards. I said, I'm sorry, I think I blew you all a kiss. She said, well, we're all just laughing. If you think of the rule of first, do no harm, just going like, I've enjoyed our meeting, see ya, that can't do any harm. Yeah, maybe I wouldn't do the blowing the kiss again. I think that was a thing in retrospect. But even that, nobody cared. I was talking with a Zoom the other day, and child 4, as we call him, we really ought to give our children name. We just don't. So child 4 rocks up. He knows that he can't talk because he can hear me talking, but he doesn't quite understand what video is. I mean, he should do. He's nearly 8. I think he must be a bit backward or something. So anyway, so he came in and just plonked himself on his knee. And he's just got his face there and said, 1 second, child 4. 1 second, everyone. Go away. I'm talking to these people. And then he went away. And I went, sorry. And they just laughed. Nobody cares. So, I mean, maybe they care deeply, but to my face, they just seemed to think it was quite funny. So I'm not suggesting and advocating you should be this way. And there will definitely be some people who really struggle with that. But in my experience, 10 minutes to go, I'm conscious of time, wrap it up with actions, and then say, I've enjoyed our meeting, not thank you for your time. I've enjoyed our meeting. See you soon. It's fine.
Another question I had in advance, as people rely on email more and more to deliver their proposals, what 3 tips can you give to the audience to increase their chances of capturing the prospect's attention and winning the business, or at least getting past the first round?
So there's 2 things there, I think. There's the email and there's the proposal. So let's have a quick look at emails first. So why do I want to do this separately? Because they're very similar. All communication has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yeah, all of it. Like, so this thing we're doing now has a beginning, middle, and end. A 1-line email to your kids has got a beginning, middle, and end. So the thing to get right is you always want the beginning to be interesting. Like I say, you serve. Your end always has to lead to actions. I'm conscious of time. So you need it to an engaging start. You need a serve at the end. So you need actions at the end. And then you need the middle to be interesting. So if you think of the 3 bits, you need engaging. You want the middle to be interesting and short, if you can. So interesting and short. And the end, the keyword is actions. So engaging, interesting and short, actions. So let's have the case of an email, a general email. If you email me and you call it FYI, well, that's not very interesting. So therefore, the engaging title hasn't worked. If you send me an email which is called today's webinar, that's better than FYI, but I'm still not hurtling to open it. If you call it today's webinar dash a quick question to ask Andy, ... So that all goes in the subject line, Craig. Today's webinar dash a quick question to ask ... That's really interesting to me because I want to know what the question is. And also you've said it's quick. So today's webinar, all right. Today's webinar dash a quick question to ask ... Brilliant. Today's webinar dash a small favor. All these things get your emails open really quickly. I mean, if you want, you can rewrite the whole title. I worked with a sales director once. He'd sent an email out to his team called Figures, and nobody replied to it because it was called Figures, so it sounds boring. So what I said is, why don't you call it Figures Dash? A quick question. He goes, none of them will open it because they all hate me. I went, oh, that's such a shame. So in that case, we need to pull the big guns out. If you want to do absolute best practice, you think, what will they find most engaging in the world? And you put that in the title. So why do you need their figures? Why will they find that engaging? And he goes, well, the figures show what figures they've made in the month. I said, yeah, why will they find that engaging? He goes, because the figures will dictate what their commission payment is. So we resent the email, and this time the title was called Making Sure You Get Paid This Month. And I don't know why they seem to open that one. So what we want is we always want an engaging title with your email. So someone said before in that question about proposal. So let's say I was sending a proposal to you and you told me all you wanted in the world was nice spaghetti bolognese. Then my email title would be called Proposal: How You Can Have Nice Spaghetti Bolognese. So straight away you open it because that's what you want. I sent one only this morning. It said Proposal: How You'll Generate £50 million revenue in 3 months. You know, you're going to open that. So when you send an email or when you do anything, the golden rule is the serve has to be brilliant. So make sure it's brilliant. So that's the first thing. Now let's go to the end. The end of an email needs to have the call to action, what you want somebody to do in it. So the bottom of an email should never end with, should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call, because that's not asking anyone to do anything. Yeah. So instead, what you say is something like, please could you, and then you ask them to do something. So you might say something like, please can you hit reply and confirm you've received this proposal. If I don't hear back from you, I'll give you a quick ring tomorrow just to make sure you've got it. And what that does at the call to action, because I hate when you send a proposal and no one even acknowledges it. It's just rude. Yep. So you put all this love and effort into a proposal. They don't even say they've got it. So if you have proposal, here's how you get spaghetti bolognese. And then at the bottom you say, hit reply and tell me you've got it or I'm ringing you tomorrow. Then that's the nice way to do a covering email. So when you come to write the middle's quite straightforward, really. Hi, Craig. Hope you're well. As promised, I've created a proposal for you. It covers everything we agreed today. Please, can you hit reply and confirm you've got it, or I'll ring you tomorrow. So I'm conscious I'm having a bit of a rant here, but is this making sense? So you need an engaging title, content needs to be short and interesting, and then you ask them to do something. And that's the same whether it's an email or a proposal's the same. So the proposal front page is going to be how Craig can have nice spaghetti bolognese. Then I'm going to have an interesting short proposal, and the end is going to tell you what to do. To accept this proposal, Craig, please sign page 3 and send it back to me. So that way you're engaged at the start, spaghetti bolognese, and at the end you know what to do because I've told you to sign page 3. So anyone listening to this, look at your most recent proposal, look at your first page, does it have spaghetti bolognese on it? And look at your last page, did it tell them how to accept your proposal?
We've had a question coming in the chat room. What would you say to those that are finding it difficult to plan for next year?
Well, my first thing I would say is you have my every sympathy. I think planning for next year is extraordinarily difficult. I mean, it's quite hard to know how to plan for next week, really. So what I would suggest you do is plan as far ahead as you feel comfortable doing with any certainty, and then be maybe less prescriptive than you would normally be with your planning, but go more for general sense of direction. So one of the things that we do with our plans is normally we might look ahead for this long. At the minute, we're looking ahead for this long, just because it's so impossible to know what's going to be happening 6, 9, 12 months from now. So instead of forensically planning the next 12, we're forensically planning the next 3, and we've got quite a good idea about months 4, 5, and 6. So shorten your timelines, but what you want to do when you're shortening your timeline, because we're creatures of habit, don't just replicate what you did in the previous 6 months. Just ask yourself, what do I need to change here? Almost definitely my customers have less choice than they did because they can't go face to face. Almost definitely my customers are probably a bit miffed by being on this lockdown all the time. Quite possibly my customers have got less money than they had. Quite possibly my customers are getting lots more noise from my competitors than they used to, who are getting increasingly, desperate maybe. So just be realistic when you're planning, and don't plan too far ahead, but just try and be innovative in the way you do things. Just think of different ways to achieve stuff. I'm quite good at coming up with different ways. So I'll give you my contact details later. Anyone can ring me with anything if we don't get to cover it today.
I was talking to someone yesterday about motivation, and I found myself a couple of weeks ago, found myself struggling to motivate myself from working from home. What are you doing to motivate yourself, motivate your team, motivate your clients to keep things moving, take action?
Yeah, that's I think probably that's the question I've been asked mostly throughout this time. I've been working from home. When I set this business up, it's about 17 or 18 years old. So I've been working from home, or I used to go to my client's premises. Remember that? So I used to do stuff like that. But I have been working from home for that length of time, which means that after a bit, you become a bit of a veteran at it without realizing. And there are certain things which I find are really important. Number one is energy. There are certain things that give you energy, and they have to go into your diary. You have to make time for doing them. Otherwise, the only thing that goes in the diary, if you're not careful, is energy sapping stuff, like 10 back-to-back Zoom meetings. I understand why that would go in the diary, but that is not sustainable. You might just survive one day of it, but 1 month where you do it every day, you'd just be in a mess at the end of it. So one thing I would strongly suggest that you and everyone listening to this, that you think, what gives me energy? What do I find gives me energy? So, and I've got a list of about 20 things that I find give me energy, and I put them all as bullet points. So I've got this list of 20 bullet points, and I have a regular diary entry which says energy break, and it might be half an hour. But when I do that, I just look at my list of 20, and that reminds me of something I can do. The reason I do that, if I don't put it in the diary, well, I don't have time to do it because there's nothing in the diary. And if I don't list these 20 bullet points in the diary, what will happen is when I go there, it'll say energy break. And if I'm feeling a bit tired, I'll think, oh, I can't think what to do. I'll do a Zoom, because I just can't think of anything to do. So it's hard to be creative when you're a bit pissed off. So these are the sort of things I do to give me energy. Number one, go and find someone to talk to who's not work. So I might ring my mum and dad, or I might ring one of my mates. Or if one of the kids isn't at school, I might go and have a chat with them. That's always last resort. I'd rather do Zooms than that. Another thing gives me energy is fresh air. Another thing that gives me energy is laughing. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll go in YouTube and I'll type the name of a comedian who I quite like, just click that, and I'll go outside and just watch a video of a comedian for 5 minutes, which means I'm getting outside, I'm moving around, oxygen and blood are flowing around my body, and I'm laughing. Yeah. That's got to be better than doing 10 hours of Zoom on the trot. So that's my answer. Know what gives you energy and get it in the diary. If you don't do either of those things, eventually you're going to shrivel up a little bit.
Okay, one of my study group emailed me this morning asking, what referral techniques would you recommend right now in a time where you can't be eyeball to eyeball with your clients and prospects?
Okay, so number one, put it in the diary to ask for referrals, because if you don't put it in the diary, again, you don't have time to do it. So it's a bit like you and I know we're both very busy. We don't have time whatsoever for this chat. But yet here we are. And how are we doing it? Because it's in the diary. Yep. So sometimes people say to me, I didn't have time to ask for any referrals this week. And I say, did you have a diary entry saying ask for referrals? And they go, no. Well, they are then. So you have to have a diary entry saying ask for referrals. I have one every week. It just says ask for a referral. That's the first thing you need. So that's like the when covered. When am I going to do it? Second thing you need is who am I going to ask? And all you do is you just have a look down your customer list and choose someone who likes you. If you can't find anyone, that's probably another problem we'll look at on another webinar. And so you've got the when is in the diary, who comes from your customer list or one of your friends, whatever. And the final one is the what, and what are you going to say? And there's various ways that you can ask for referrals, but my favorite one is not to ask for a referral, Craig. What I do is I ask for advice. So let's say I happen to see on LinkedIn that you are linked in with the UK head of commercial sales for one of the large banks, and I want to work with them. So what I do is I want to ask for you, from you, for this referral into this. Let's say this lady's called Jemima. So I want to speak to Jemima. So what I do is I ring you up, but here's the sneaky thing. My script doesn't say, would you mind referring me into Jemima? Because you might not feel comfortable doing that. or she might be a mega contact of yours and you don't like me enough to do it, or you're not quite sure or you just don't, whatever it might be. So I don't ask for a referral. What I do, this is so clever, is I ask for advice. So I say, Craig, can I ask your advice about something? And you go, yes, because everyone will say yes to this. I say, I see on LinkedIn that you know Jemima, the head of sales of that bank. I was trying to reach out to her because I'm doing a lot of work with large organizations to help them make sales in a lockdown. Because all her colleagues will be trained to sell face-to-face and they don't know how to do it virtually. Well, obviously, I know a lot about this because I've got a blind mum and a lot of my clients are making a lot of money at the minute. So I'd love to speak to her, but I don't know her and you do. Here's where I want your advice. How would you advise I approach her? So can you hear? I haven't said the word referral here at all. I've just said, I want to speak to this specific person because I've got this specific value to give her. I don't even know her. You do. How do you advise I approach her? And what do you think most people say, Craig, when I say that?
Would you like me to make an introduction?
I go, oh yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. So there we go. Yeah. I mean, if it's someone who's a really good friend, you might say the word favor instead of advice. I'm like, Craig, do you mind if I ask you a favor? You go, what is it? So, your friend Jemima, I really want to speak to her. Would you mind putting in a good word? So if you're talking to someone who you have a good relationship with, you use the word favor. If you're talking to somebody, maybe it's a bit more tenuous, you use the word advice. But notice I'm specific on who I want to speak to, Jemima, and why it's in Jemima's interest. Because if I just say to you, or the person who asked a question about referrals, if I just say, would you mind recommending me to anybody? You'll just say, yeah, fine. And then a week later, I'll think, where's Craig's bloody recommendations? And it's really hard for you to initiate that. But if I say I want to speak to someone in a bank, that gets easier. But if you go and talk to Jemima and say, I want you to meet my friend Andy, and she goes, why? And you go, because he's nice. And it sounds like you're on commission for me. So it's much better for you. You need to know Jemima, and you need to know Jemima's going to be better off if she talks to me. Yeah, so that's all you need to do, the referral piece.
Okay, I'm going to be a little bit selfish now as we sort of start to bring this to an end, Andy. I remember you spoke at Celtic Manor for one of our professional bodies a couple of years ago, and the thing that I took away and we still use now is you talked about having an executive summary at the start of your financial plans and call it an all you need to know page, which we do. We can stole that from you. I'm just looking if there's anything else that's game changing I can nick from you around anything like that.
Game changing. Well, we've done some pretty game changing stuff so far. I'll tell you what, here's two or three. Let's just see. I'll do them super fast. If you want any more detail, let me know. Right. Number one, with proposals, confirmation, not exploration. In other words, when you write a proposal, before you send it, confirm everything with the client. So you don't explore anything when you send it. For example, let's say you want a proposal for how we're going to work together and you say, oh, Andy, just put something in writing, and I don't know what you want in writing. I'm bound to write 10 pages of stuff because I don't know what you want. And then I'm guessing what you want. So some of it won't be relevant. It takes me ages to write. You can't be bothered reading it. And then the final page explores a price you haven't even heard me talk about yet. So you suddenly look at this and go, I didn't even want all this. You're charging how much? Well, he didn't mention that on the phone, did he? So actually, it's much better when you're talking verbally, confirm it all. So confirm what the client wants, confirm how you can help them, confirm what the price is. So one thing I'll often say is, I'm conscious we haven't agreed price yet. Can we just have a quick chat about that? And people will sometimes say, no, put it in your proposal. I say, well, I'd rather not, because I want to make sure that we both think the same thing. So let's have a quick chat about it. So I will not write a proposal unless people have confirmed what they're buying, how much they're paying, the topics they want me to include in the proposal. So basically my proposals are all about like 3/4 of a page long. And they say, that stuff we said in our meeting and the price we said in the meeting, well, let's just do that then, shall we? So my proposals are really short. So confirmation, not exploration. I find that super helpful.
So can I just, again, to be a bit selfish, for those of us, because I know there's quite a few financial planners on the call watching us live. So for those of us who are given advice, any sort of, I think 3/4 of a page to give financial advice might be a bit tough. Any other add-ons I can get from you around that side of things, advice?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, I just said 3/4 of a page because I'm not as clever as you, so I don't have anything more than 3/4 of a page to say. You might find it's 3 pages, not 3/4, but it doesn't need to be 10. Yeah. What you really want to be saying is when you're sending stuff through, it's like, as we agreed today, this is how we can best help you. or as we agreed, this is what you're looking to achieve. This is how we can best help you. And these are our fees for doing so. And assuming you want to go ahead, this is how you take the next step. So you want it to be as short as possible. So 3/4 of the page, that was just an illustration.
Yeah.
Keep it short, yeah. Other things that you can do are make sure, and it sounds really obvious this, but make sure you're speaking to your customers more than you normally do. Because your customers at the minute are a bit rattled, and it's really easy in desperate times to forget the people who you really ought to be ringing more in the desire to try and win more work. Strangers are not as important as customers. So again, if you need to, put a reminder in your diary once every couple of days, ring a customer up. Even if you just say, hi, how are you? Not spoken to if you're a bit. How are you finding this lockdown stuff? Anything more we can do to, all right, cool. Love you, bye. Even if you just do that, at least you are front of mind with them. And it sounds like you give a toss. I can't be doing with, there's one supplier in particular who's no longer a supplier of mine, who didn't speak to me at all for the first 3 months of lockdown, and then did and tried to sell me a product that I have no need for at all. And it really pissed me off, because I thought the only reason you've run me is to try and sell me something. And you haven't thought about me, because you know I wouldn't want this if you thought about it for any time whatsoever. And I hate that. And you want to make sure that you're being nice to your customers. They need your help. They're probably a bit rattled. We're all a bit rattled. So just give them a ring and ask how they are. You know, it might only take you 2 minutes, but it's not going to do any harm, is it?
Yeah, we did a lot of that. Yeah. Right. And for all of our people who've joined us are still with us. So if anyone, I'm just going to ask Andy a few more questions, but if anyone's got anything they want to throw in, now's the time, because it's speak now or forever hold thy peace. So what's the best book you've read this year then, Andy?
Best book I've read this year. I read one that I quite liked. I really liked. It was called If Disney Ran Your Hospital. So good old Disney again. By a guy called Fred Lee, If Disney Ran Your Hospital. And it was about a guy who has worked for hospitals all his life. And then he worked for Disney for a bit. And then he went back to hospitals. And he was just saying that because he'd been to hospitals before Disney, he thought habits that you had to do things a certain way. And then when he went to Disney, and their customer service obviously is ridiculously good, generally, then what happens is he went back to the hospital and he realized there were some things that you could take from Disney into a hospital. And he gave a nice example of when you go and see an ill person in hospital, and it's at the shift changeover with the nurses and doctors. I've experienced this before. I go and see, like, how's my mum doing? And they go, we'll come back to you in a second, sir. We're just doing the shift changeover. And he was saying, like, there is no need to do that at all. There is no need. Yeah, you could just spend 30 seconds saying, let me put your mind at rest. We're in the middle of this, but overall, we've had good progress. I'll come and speak to you in a minute. And he said, there is no need whatsoever to be the way we usually are. Now, I'm not casting any aspersions on any hospitals. I don't work for hospitals. I'm just quoting this guy here. But I really like that. And he was saying, if you can take Disney stuff into a hospital, you can take a lot of stuff into a lot of places. And I really like that book. So Fred Lee, If Disney Ran Your Hospital.
Yeah, someone's just asked, well, can you repeat the name? They said you froze at their end. Maybe you could give, I love the Disney books. I finally read the autobiography beginning of this year, and it's a big old read, but I'm a big fan.
In it, yeah.
Yeah, but it was good. If you had to give a top 5 books of worth for people who want to self-develop and improve, and outside of your own, obviously, what any other top books you?
Well, clearly everyone should buy my 3, all of them, 20 times each. I would suggest, what do I like? Sometimes, like, if you're into sales and so on, the Challenger Sale is a really good one. So that was based on some research done by the Sales Executive Council. So the Challenger Sale, that's probably the best book I've read on sales. I really like that one. Customer Service is the Disney one, the Fred Lee one I've just mentioned. Yeah, one thing I really like is Who Moved Me Cheese. I just thought that was really interesting, and it's very, very easy reading. So I like that. So, and that talks about how sometimes we become so creatures of habit we just don't think of changing. So they're 3 good ones. There are others, but let's go with those 3 to start with, and all of mine, of course.
Okay, I'm going to go with a deep one that someone sent me in advance then. So in 5 years' time, how do you think we will look back at this time? And if we don't like the answer, what can we do now to influence how we feel about what we did?
That is an amazing one. I think when we look back, we will think, my gut feel is I think that we will think we massively overreacted in certain ways. I mean, I was just looking at the newspaper. I understand why, but Cineworld are thinking of shutting. Theatres are struggling, and it's not just cinemas and theatres the only thing that matters. There are so many things that are struggling, hospitality and all that sort of stuff. And the cost is so great. I have a feeling that some people will think we've overreacted. Maybe that's because I'm wondering if we are doing a little. I'm not saying it's not important, but my word, it's hard.
Yeah.
What can we do at the minute? The main thing to do at the minute, I think, is to make sure that you do what's right for you and to make sure that you don't overact in your own way. So I was talking to mum and dad before. I'm quite old, so therefore they're really old. I think dad's 78 or something, mum's 83. And they said, like, we're in the same bubble, so we can meet, but what are we supposed to do? And I said, look, it's up to you. Like, you tell me what you want, but I'm your son. And I would imagine as an 83-year-old, one of the things you'd want to do more than anything is see your son. So if you want to meet me, don't let all this noise mean you're not doing. We can always find a way to make something work. We're clever people, we're innovative people. And talking to my parents about this, they said, actually, that is right. They're of an age now. I mean, they want to knock on for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, I'm planning to get my mum a 17-year diary for her next birthday present, So they're planning to be around for a very long time. We're lucky that they're healthy and so on. But they're of an age where there's nothing better than seeing their family. And so we just have to make sure that we don't overreact as well, I think. So
I'm going to make this one the final question is coming on the question and answer. How do you leave a refusal?
Or if someone says they don't want to buy.
That's what the gentleman has typed. How would you leave a
Yeah.
refusal? So I assume so, yeah.
Okay, so all I do with that is I always end up really nicely, and I say, okay, absolutely understand. I hope it goes really well for you. With your agreement, what I'll do is I always find new things out every now and again. So if I happen to find out anything useful, which I think is relevant to this project, would you mind if I sent over a little email containing it? If you would, I don't mind. But if I do find anything new, would you find that helpful? And almost always people say, yeah, that's fine, Andy. So what happens is I leave with no hard feelings at all, with permission to contact them again, and with people thinking that every time they hear from me, it will be with a value add. And I just find that's a nice way to end, because if someone doesn't choose me, it's rare that it's not personal. That's fine. It's okay. I wouldn't expect everyone to want to buy from me. I don't want to buy from everyone I meet either. And I don't want to end in a way that's inappropriate. So I want people to think I was nice, that I was hoping they got the best, and that I was continuing to give them stuff they'd find helpful. Whether they happen to give me money or not is irrelevant, really. And if I end like that, I can look at myself in the mirror and think, well, I've been nice there, and that's okay.
Hopefully, Richard, I captured that question as you wanted it, but thank you for that. So, Andy, obviously, we can't have a round of applause because no one else, we can't see any of the others, but thank you very much for that. Where can people find you?
So my email address is just andy@andybounds.com. So anybody can email me if they want. I'm on LinkedIn and I post stuff all the time. So if anyone wants anything from me, so andy@andybounds.com, or just connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and ever since I first saw Andy speak, I get the Tuesday bulletin,
tips,
Tuesday tips, and there's loads of free videos and stuff on Andy's website if you want to go and have a look and learn more about what Andy was. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. I hope child number 4 becomes all that you want him to become.
He better. I don't think we'll have child number 5 at this rate.
So thank you. This will go out on our podcast for those of you who know someone who might want to watch back and learn some stuff from Andy. When the podcast goes out, please do share it, and the video will probably go on LinkedIn a couple of times as well. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you again, Mr. Bounds. It's been enjoyable.
Good. No, I've enjoyed it. Thanks to all of you for listening. Take care now. Bye. What is it? Love you.
All right, I'll just stop that.